Hitchhiking is when a pedestrian asks a passing vehicle for a ride without paying a fare. Someone who hitchhikes is called a hitchhiker, and many people around the world use this method to travel for free. It's important to note that while hitchhiking is free, it can also be dangerous. So dangerous, in fact, that since 1979, around 500 murders of hitchhikers have been reported in the United States. Today's video isn't about a murder case. It's the criminal case of a 15-year-old hitchhiker whose life changed forever in 1978. If you like these kinds of cases, don't forget to like this video, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. Mary Vincent was born in 1963 and was one of 7 children in the Vincent family. Their family life was not good. Aside from economic hardship, there was also a lack of emotional connection among family members. Mary's mother worked in a casino, and her father was a mechanic. When they got married, her father was serving in the U.S. Army, and their marriage was completely sudden and unplanned. These decisions were part of the reasons the Vincent family was never happy. In the midst of all this, Mary, one of the 7 children, became so tired of her parents fighting that one day she ran away from their home in Las Vegas. She lived and slept in the streets and in unlocked cars for a short time until she finally went to her grandfather's house in California in September 1978. Mary was 15 years old at the time and hitchhiked the entire 905-kilometer, about 562 miles, route from Las Vegas to California. The 15-year-old Mary dreamed of becoming a professional dancer and painter, performing all over the world and seeing every country. She was a dreamer who didn't take life too seriously and tried to enjoy every moment. This led her to leave home one night in September and hitchhike 905 kilometers in strangers' cars to reach her grandfather's house. Hitchhiking was not new to Mary. This girl had ridden in passing cars around Las Vegas many times, but this was the first time she had hitchhiked such a long distance. Mary arrived safely in California and found her grandfather. She stayed in California for about a month until she became homesick. On the 29th day of September 1978, she packed her few belongings and hit the road again. Along the way, she saw 2 other hitchhikers, and the 3 of them stood by the roadside waiting for a car to pick them up. After a short wait, a 50-year-old man named Lawrence Singleton parked his white van on the side of the road and told the 3 hitchhikers that he only had room for 1 person. The van was almost empty, but Lawrence absolutely refused to take all 3 of them. The other 2 strangers didn't get in the van and preferred to wait for the next car, but Mary Vincent was so tired and hot that she ignored the other 2 and got into Lawrence Singleton's white van alone. A few kilometers down the road, Lawrence slowly slowed down the car and then suddenly hit Mary Vincent on the head with a sledgehammer. The teenage girl was knocked unconscious by the blow to her head. After this, Lawrence drove the car to a deserted area and tied up Mary's hands and feet. Throughout the night, he repeatedly raped and sexually tortured the 15-year-old Mary. He paid no attention to the girl's pleas for help and her cries and resistance. Mary told Lawrence, "Why are you doing this to me? Please let me go. I promise I won't tell anyone." And she received no response but silence. According to Mary's testimony, the 50-year-old man raped Mary 6 times, then fell asleep, leaving Mary defenseless, terrified, and with no way to escape. The night finally ended and the sun rose, but the crime against Mary Vincent had not yet reached its peak. When Lawrence woke up, he spoke for the first time since he had knocked Mary out. They were still in the middle of the desert, kilometers away from any town, and Mary Vincent was even too tired to beg anymore. Lawrence said, "Do you want to be free? Okay, I'll set you free." Then he opened his toolbox and pulled out an axe. He grabbed the girl's left arm tightly, and Mary clung to Lawrence's shoulder so she wouldn't fall. She was so scared that she didn't realize exactly what was happening, but no matter how hard she held onto Lawrence's arm, she couldn't stop herself from falling. Mary was thrown to the ground, and it was here that a terrible pain overtook her whole body. Lawrence Singleton was standing in front of her, trying to detach Mary's severed arm from her shoulder. Mary was on the ground, but her severed hand was still holding onto Lawrence's shoulder. Lawrence severed Mary's right arm with the axe in the same way he did her left, and then threw the half-dead body of the 15-year-old girl off a 9-meter, about 30-foot cliff. Mary was thrown into a pond, and in addition to her 2 severed arms, 4 of her ribs were also broken. According to Mary's testimony, at that moment she was so exhausted by everything that she just wanted to sleep forever, but she fought against her thoughts and got up from the ground. The 15-year-old Mary Vincent buried the wounds of her severed arms in the mud and dirt of the pond to stop the bleeding, and then climbed a 9-meter cliff with no hands, 4 broken ribs, and 2 open wounds. When she reached the top of the cliff, it had gotten dark again. This means it took Mary about a full day to climb a 9-meter cliff in this condition. In the darkness of the night, Mary had no light except the moonlight, and she could only hear the faint sound of cars. This 15-year-old girl walked 4.8 kilometers, about 3 miles, on a dirt road that led to a village. The bleeding from her arms had significantly decreased due to the mud. She held both arms up and walked half dead along the road. The first car that saw Mary was a red convertible with 2 men inside. Seeing Mary naked, bloody, and without hands, the 2 men were scared and, without getting out of the car, they just sped up and drove away. The next car arrived very soon, and this time the occupants of the car, a young couple, stopped on the side of the road and immediately picked up Mary Vincent. The occupants of the car took Mary to the hospital, and finally, the 15-year-old girl was safe from the monster who tried to destroy her. But this nightmare was not over, not as long as Lawrence Singleton was out there, free and roaming around. The bleeding from Mary's arms was controlled in the hospital, and the victim immediately began cooperating with the police after she regained consciousness. She even sacrificed sleep and rest to give more information to the police. Exactly 2 weeks after being hospitalized, she began using prosthetic arms and drew a picture of Lawrence Singleton's face. Keep in mind that Mary didn't even know Lawrence's name, but with this drawing and descriptions of his car, height, and build, she was able to help the police arrest the criminal. Now, only Singleton's trial and conviction remained. 6 months after the crime, Lawrence Singleton's trials began. In cases where the victim survives, it is rare for the victim to appear in court and testify against the perpetrator because they don't want to see the person again, and seeing the perpetrator again is distressing for the victim. In this case, to ensure that Lawrence would not get away with his crimes in any way, Mary Vincent personally appeared at the man's trials and testified against her rapist and torturer. But we are talking about the 70s, a decade when sexual crimes had a maximum penalty. The maximum sentence for sexual crimes in California in the 70s was 14 years, and Lawrence Singleton was only sentenced to 14 years for raping and sexually assaulting a 15-year-old child and cutting off both of her hands. Just 14 years. And you know what's so frustrating? The fact that everyone in the courtroom, including the judge, was not satisfied with the sentence and knew that justice had not been served for Mary, but there was nothing they could do because, according to the law, they could not sentence the man to more than 14 years in prison. At the end of the trial, the judge said that if he had the power, he would have made this man live in prison for the rest of his life. I should also mention that a civil judgment was also issued that Lawrence had to pay Mary $2.56 million, but it was found that the 50-year-old man was unemployed, in poor health, unable to work, and had a total of $200 in savings. Mary was unable to collect the $2.56 million from Lawrence Singleton. In short, the criminal was only sentenced to 14 years in prison. In addition to the horrific and brutal aspects of the crime, Lawrence's case became even more notorious after 8 years. Why? Because Lawrence Singleton, who was imprisoned for the sexual assault of a child and for cutting off her hands, was paroled and returned to society after 8 years for good behavior. Despite his release, none of California's cities accepted Lawrence's presence in their town, and in the end, he was forced to live somewhere within the San Quentin prison grounds. 1 year later, his parole ended, and he was no longer restricted from leaving California. People and police protested Lawrence's early release, and these protests became so widespread that a law called the Singleton Bill was passed in 1987. This bill includes 25 laws and generally states that any sexual offender who has sexually abused a minor under the legal age must be imprisoned for at least 25 years and not be eligible for parole sooner than 25 years. Mary Vincent was a big supporter of the bill's passage and worked very hard for it to be passed. And where is Lawrence Singleton now? If you think Lawrence's crimes have ended, you are very wrong. 9 years after his release, the rapist and torturer went to the city of Springs, Florida, and murdered a 31-year-old woman. The victim's name was Roxanne Hayes, and she was a mother of 3. A neighbor saw Lawrence covered in blood and called the police. Police officers arrived quickly and arrested Lawrence Singleton at the crime scene. This crime occurred in 1997, and when Lawrence appeared in court again, the judge needed more evidence to convict the man. In such a situation, Mary Vincent appeared in Lawrence's courtroom and testified against the criminal. Mary faced her attacker again after about 18 years. Lawrence Singleton was convicted of first-degree murder and received a death sentence. 4 years later, on December 28, 2001, while still on death row, he died of cancer in prison. Lawrence was 74 years old when he died. In today's world, in 2025, Mary has 2 adult sons and is a skilled artist. Mary's paintings often feature figures of fighting women, characters who believe in themselves and are always ready to fight. Over time, Mary has learned well how to use her prosthetic arms and has a very good life. She is proud of herself, successful, and enjoys the moments of her life. Mary loves the Lord of the Rings book series and says she sees herself as a hobbit in her house. Although she has a good life now and is happy, things were not always this way for Mary. In interviews, this woman said that when Singleton was released from prison for good behavior, her nightmares returned, and once, the nightmares were so severe that she harmed herself upon waking up and broke one of her ribs. Mary Vincent says that while Singleton's death didn't give her the peace she had been waiting for, the look of calm on her 2 sons' faces when they found out Singleton was gone forever was enough for her.